Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou, katoa. Kia ora everybody, Che Wilson here from Te Pai Pai Waho, and sending a big mihi out to you all tonight as we get into a new season, Season 5, kaupapa number 1 for Season 5, and a completely new topic, which is around Māori organisation, how we organise ourselves, and Māori collectivism. So before I get into it, go through our normal stuff first. Nā reire me I kauatu ana kia koutou, I roto I tēnei pō, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou, kia karakia tātou. Tēnei te ara kei runga, tēnei te ara e rangi, tēnei te ara o paparang, e takoto nei. Kia rarau te pane o tāna ki raro tēnei te pō, nau mai te ao. E tū ko te ao, e tū ko te pō, tū mai te pō, turuturu o hiti waka maua kia tīna ui e tāiki e. Tāiki e kia tātou I roto I tēnei pō. E mii ana, e tangi ana kia tātou katoa, kia ora tātou. As I said, it's Che Wilson here from Te Pai Pai Waho, linking to you through a range of pages tonight, and just sending a big mihi out to everybody. And firstly, want to acknowledge our mate, ngā mate o te mātahi o te tau, ko mārewa tū ki te rangi, aere atu koutou, e ue tu kimo, e ue tu ka napa I te pō. Tatu atu ki tērā rangatira nui o te moana nui ākiwa, haunani kei Trask, e oai, e oki. I want to acknowledge Haunani kei tonight, one of the kuia of Hawaii, for her amazing leadership in challenging the system. And so I thought it was appropriate to acknowledge her tonight. Koea kua riro atu ki te pō, ko tāpiki atu, e ue tu I te rangi, whakangaro atu ai, e moe, e oki. And before I get into this first session of Season 5, I want to acknowledge that Te Pai Pai Waho has been going for over 2 years now, probably about 26, 27 months. And wow. Yeah, I had a break last week just to finish that season off. And also my little gift to have a little bit of a matariki break. Plus, thought it would be good just to acknowledge all of the matariki celebrations. Because when I think about it, matariki started to become popular when I was at university in the early to mid-90s. And even though had different whānau members that were named after the different stars depending on when they were born, including Kāhui Matariki and other names like that. From the days at being in Wellington when Te Papa was first opened and these public ceremonies and celebrations that were held through to where we've got to this year, it's just amazing. And really want to acknowledge everybody's efforts, and especially Rangi Mātaumua Kaz, tēnā koe, Ioma Inui. And I'm pretty sure Koro Jim would be stoked to see where the knowledge has got to. Nā reira tēnā koe, kei te tuakana e rangi, koutou ko kare moana, koutou ko anko Matma, tēnā koutou. But to everybody else that's doing it as well, whether it's organisations celebrating it over the last few weeks, whether people have been reviving different tikanga throughout the years, what it's got is it's got taken us as a country to a new place. And I hope it takes us to other conversations. Classic example is the Southern Cross from a Māori perspective has 5 stars. And yep, Samoa's got 5 stars. Australia's got 5 plus the extra 2. We've only got 4. But I think it's going to just take us to a new place as we walk together on a journey of hope, and we work on a journey of discovery where we remember to remember. And I love that phrase. I first heard that phrase from Sir Tipene Regan, where he's continually reminding us to remember to remember. So I want to acknowledge Matariki, and now entering into season 5 of Te Pai Pai Waho, and number 1, episode 1 in season 5, where I'll be talking about Māori organisation and collectivism. I'm not talking about Māori orgs as such, but how we organised ourselves traditionally, how we've been organising ourselves for the last 100 plus years, and what the future state will look like as well. Because I think it's really important for us to look at the future state in one of the next episodes, because the current state, there are challenges with it. But for us to do that, we've got to go back first and remember to remember and look at what were traditional forms of organisation. And before I do that, I thought I'd just cover the why I've chosen this topic. And I think the key point today is, one, Missy suggested it, but two, we're going through so many challenges. And the challenges we're going through, you just look at housing, what we're doing is we're trying to put the same old broken, the thought processes that have brought us to this broken place where we've got a housing crisis. It's going to be difficult to find the solutions from those thought processes. And Einstein said that the consciousness that created the problem won't be the same consciousness that will find the solution. And going back to the future, or going back into our own culture to look at how we can grow, is going to take us to a better place. So that's the why I thought around how we discuss Māori organisation and collectivism going forward. So let's look at the traditional forms of organisation. And so, as we know, there are whānau, hapu, and iwi. I'm not going to deal with waka too much, because waka is a construct that came up and gained more prominence post World War I. It's not that it wasn't used in the past, but post World War I, it gained prominence. And so I'm just going to focus on whānau, hapu, and iwi. So as we know, whānau is not the nuclear family. Whānau is an intergenerational grouping of people. Usually at least grandparents, parents, grandchildren, sometimes great-grandchildren. That collective is what we call a whānau. And usually that whānau would be led by a kaumātua, the elder of that grouping. And kaumātua is not gender specific, but as a result of colonisation, we now say kaumātua and kuia, as if kuia weren't kaumātua, but they are. But because of our colonised minds, we now say, oh, can all the kaumātua and kuia go this way? When you should just be saying, can all the kaumātua go that way? Kuia mai, koroheke mai, koroua mai. And I think what's happened as a result of losing the language, some bad habits have stuck, including that one where we say kaumātua and kuia. And I know there are going to be people that challenge and say, oh, well, in our area, that's what we say. And kea koutou tērā, that's over to you. But the term kaumātua is not gender specific. Koroua and kuia, they are gender specific. And so that would normally be organised in that way, and the able-bodied group would be doing the grunt work. When you then have a collection of whānau, they would make up a hapu. And the hapu would usually descend from an eponymous ancestor that might be only 3 or 4 generations above that grandparent. Over time, a bigger descent group, because we haven't continued to create new hapu. The odd grouping has around the country, but it was common for you to create new hapu as you got too big. And simply because as disputes started to come up, and where the process of finding rongo or finding peace wasn't able to be achieved successfully, often people would branch off and therefore create new hapu. And so whānau, one grouping, groups of whānau that descend from one ancestor become a hapu, and then groups of hapu become an iwi. The interesting thing with iwi is that iwi would often be within a geographical area, and those hapu on the boundaries of that iwi would often swing between the two iwi, simply because their whakapapa allowed them to. And often iwi were only used for political reasons, whether that be business and trading, whether that be dispute and war, and or resource allocation. Otherwise, everything was kept to whānau and hapu. Post the treaty, you had other groups evolve. And the intertribal group that often came out was through a prophetic leader, somebody who had divine inspiration, who was able to guide and take people to another place. And therefore, groupings of people would come together from different iwi and follow a person. After that, there'd be intermarriage and often matchmaking to ensure that the relationships that were bonded through that divine leadership and inspiration would be maintained into the future. And then later on, we had the kotahitanga movement and other movements that have brought Māori together for a kaupapa. What our tupuna were very good at is that they would come together for a kaupapa and then disband once the kaupapa was over. What's happened today, as we focus in on heritage, because Māori's perspective on heritage is quite different, but we've become a lot more rigid rather than the flexible and agile space that our tupuna lived in. And we've often used excuses of tapu to maintain the rigidity, when actually it's just pure brilliance of colonization blowing our minds and making us think that we can't change it because it's tapu, when often that's a load of rubbish and has just been the influence of colonization on us. I did say I'm going to be a bit provocative in these kōrero. And so we now have to look at how we wean some of the bad habits and practices, and I'm going to talk about those challenges that we have as we go through the next few episodes on this session of Māori organisation and collectivism. In addition, I'll be talking about solutions and how we find solutions to get us to a better place. Because of whānau and whanaungatanga is a key value and practice for us, I look forward to us owning our own dairies and fish and chip shops and other businesses where we are working as a whānau maintaining whanaungatanga. I also look forward to us getting rid of this idea that money is evil, because the notion of hapu and iwi coming together was based on business and was based on resources and the allocation and use of those resources. But as a result of colonization, we've believed the misquote that money is the root of all evil, which it isn't. It's the desire, not just for money, but for anything. And when desire goes crazy, you go kōtiti and you lose the plot. But I look forward to these conversations and how we can lean back into tupuna wisdom and use our tupuna eyes and our tupuna ears to reconnect and remember the brilliance that our tupuna had and what we can use in this modern context today and as we go into the future. Because there are some things which won't work, but there will be a heap of things that will work to take us to a better place. And I look forward to that conversation, because for too long, tapu has been a barrier. And don't get me wrong, yes, there are things that are tapu, but often tapu has been used as an excuse not to do something purely because of fear, not necessarily because of a breach of tapu. Hoi anō, I think that's it for tonight. And e mihi ana kia koutou. Feel free to send some whakaaro and thoughts through on Te Pai Waho so that I can capture them and then see how I can intertwine them over the next few weeks into the episodes as we look at Māori organisation, how Māori organise ourselves, and how we collectivise going into the future. Because if we look at the housing crisis, who said we each individually need a house? I look at other cultures that have moved here. They've been able to maintain their kōrero and actually all live in the same house. But is it perhaps the way that the colonisers convinced us that we must have a quarter-acre section that's taking us to the wrong solution rather than finding things that work for us? Ka te ake, I'm going to talk more about that over the next few weeks. E mihi kau atu ana kia koutou katoa. Stay safe. See a few people linking in from Ngāti Pimpima over in Queensland and other parts of the world. E mihi kau atu ana. Pō Māori re, kia hokaere ake ngā kupu ki te tā nui o rangi nui e tūnei. Au mie, ui e, tā iki e. Pō Māori re, kia ora tātou.